G'day guys, welcome to another Facebook Live, doing things a little bit differently today. Today I'm speaking with John Lindeman. He is regarded as one of the best property analysts in the country. So we're very lucky to hear what John has to say today. He's been in the space, in the property data space for some time. So I've been following John for quite some time myself. And yeah, always surprises me at how accurate his predictions are. So welcome, John. Thanks for giving up some time and coming on and have a bit of a chat. And appreciate it.
That's absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to it myself, and happy to share whatever knowledge I can provide. It'd be great.
Yeah, awesome, John. Alrighty, well, look, I mean, obviously, I have sort of been following you for some time. I think I've probably been following you since about 2016, maybe. I think it was about then. I remember you came to an event in Perth. At the time, Perth market was doing pretty poorly, if I must say myself. We were sort of on a decline for quite some time. And I remember you sort of coming over and saying, oh, look, the market's not great, but there was one or two sort of different suburbs. Anyway, that were sort of bucking the trend at the time. Anyway, so I sort of started following you back then and obviously have ever since. But for those who don't know you, or even for some of those who may have heard of you, can you tell us a bit about you and your story and how you sort of got into the whole property analyst and analyzing data?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's as you can probably tell by looking at me, I've been around a long time. I'm in this business because I love two things. One is looking at the numbers, and the other thing is making money. So it's a good combination if you get it right. But when I started, I really didn't know much about how to make money at all. I bought my first house in Hawthorne in Melbourne a long time ago. But to my surprise, it doubled in value in about 4 years. We held it for 4 years and it doubled. And I thought, oh, this is incredible. Property investment is really the way to go. And so I bought another house, and then after 4 years, we had to move again due to work commitments. And I discovered that price hadn't gone up at all. And we'd done renovation and everything, but we actually lost money. And so I thought, I really don't understand the property market at all. I was in my early 20s at that point. So I decided to find out as much as I could. I went to webinars and boot camps and free events, and I read books on the property market, but none of them could actually tell me how the market worked and how investors could get the greatest benefit. So I thought, I've got to do this myself. I'd finished my professional studies. I'm a marketer and a statistician. And I went to work for the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and I discovered a thing called trend analysis, which is where they look at the trends. They don't just look at the numbers, but which way they're moving and how you could make predictions about whether gold was going to go up or down, or share prices. And I thought, well, surely you can apply the same logic to the property market. So I then went to work at Residex. I was the head of research there. And I put that into practice, and I discovered, yes, you can actually predict which way prices are likely to move. And so when I'd done that, I set up my own company called Property Power Partners back in 2011. And since then, we've been doing this non-stop, just innovative research on how the property market works and how you can get the most benefit. So we issue reports, we do seminars, we've got different services available. But the main aim is to help investors make the best possible decisions.
Awesome. Very, very interesting. So can you give us a bit of a understanding as to how how those trends work? So, from a data perspective, like how do you actually use that data to, predict something, to predict a market accurately?
Sure. Graham, what happened, it was during the global financial crisis, and I was at that time, I was working at Residex, and the banks came to me, the big banks, and they said, John, we are really concerned that property prices could fall. Now, up to that point, it was pretty unheard of that could happen, but it looked like it might, because it was happening in America and Europe and the UK. And so I decided to start looking at what data matters and what doesn't, which are the indicators that can tell you whether prices are likely to go up or down. So after a few years of research, I realised it was all about supply and demand. and that you can measure these two. We're very lucky in Australia. We've got access to all this data, and a lot of it is free, and you can look at the demand, which is simply the number of sales that have occurred, or the supply, which is the inventory or the stock that's available for sale. And there are very good close correlations between supply and demand, which apply and enable you to predict the future. So what I did was put that into practice after the GFC when I set up my own company, and I started to make some pretty bold predictions. I predicted in 2016 that Hobart was going to be the next boom city. That was published, and I think mainly because people just didn't believe it, that it was possible. Hobart had gone nowhere for 10 years, and in the next 2 years it nearly doubled in price and was the best performer in the whole of Australia. I think the next example, which was Perth, you may remember this yourself, Graham, when I said back in about 2 years ago, I remember you saying to me, well, which way is Perth going? And I said, well, Graham, the indicators, and we built a database that measures every indicator for all the suburbs in Australia, and the indicators are saying that Perth was about to boom, and of course that's exactly what's happened. But more particularly, it was going to be the lower priced areas that were going to boom. Investors were going to pour in, East Coast investors and buyers agents, and that's exactly what's happened.
Awesome. And not only that, you also can predict when cities and suburbs are not going to do so well. I remember having conversations with you, like I said, not long after I first met you. It would have been around 2015 or something like that. And I remember saying, look, I bought a property in this particular suburb, and I bought a report off you, and you said, no, it's only going to go from basically bad to worse. And that's exactly what it did. It dropped in price, and I remember at the time thinking, you can't get, it's going to have to recover soon. And I didn't. I kept it, and for the next few years, like most suburbs in Perth, it did go from bad to worse. So awesome, John. So my next question, the market at the moment. I mean, obviously, I know you talk a lot about you can't sort of not every suburb in one city is acting the same at the same time and that sort of stuff. It's very suburb individual. But what are you seeing in the market at the moment across Australia?
Well, I'm seeing that contrary to what most experts predicted, that prices have been going up ever since we had those 12 consecutive interest rate rises. Most people thought, well, that's going to kill the market for good, and it did slow down. It went backwards for a little while in some of the bigger cities like Melbourne and Sydney, but in general, we've seen continued price growth occurring, and the reason for that is simply because the demand for property is exceeding the supply. We've had a massive number of people coming into Australia in the last 2 years, and we're getting more people coming in as well. So another 500,000 expected this year. So huge numbers of arrivals. Nearly all of them are renters. They'll be renting for a number of years. So that's pushing up rent demand all around Australia, but especially in the capital cities where these people arrive, like Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth in particular. Now, the problem is we need these people because we've got huge shortages of skilled labour. We need people to work in industries where there are massive shortages of labour. So we need them to come here. But on the other hand, they're pushing up the rent demand, and rents are going up. And of course, we're not building enough properties. The rate of building construction, according to the ABS, for units, townhouses and villas is about half what we need. So we're not building enough. The demand is increasing, and it just means that rents are going up. And of course, investors can see that in an environment where the share market's not really doing much and crypto is a bit risky, then property is a really safe, secure form of investment. And when you see the price growth that's occurred, like in Adelaide and Perth, we've had over 50% growth in the lowest price suburbs in Perth in the last 2 years. More investors are motivated by that, and so you get more and more demand, and the prices go up even further. I can see that pretty much all around Australia in the big capital cities, continued growth, but rents are going to go up even more because there's no solution to the housing crisis that I can see.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, like I sort of just touched on before, Australia is not one market. It's very much not so. As far as the best opportunities at the moment, what would you be seeing at the moment as the best opportunities for investors in Australia right now?
Well, it's interesting because what we've seen happen in Adelaide and Perth in particular, in those lower priced suburbs, where you could have bought a house 2 years ago in Rockingham or Mandurah for 300,000, a fairly good three-bedder. They're now worth 550. And it gets to the point where investors simply say, well, hang on, that's a lot of money. When it gets up to around 600,000 to buy a fairly, moderate sort of house, you think, well, is that worth it? Can I do better? And so they look at other areas, and investors are starting to look at southeast Queensland. Ipswich has already gone up a lot. I believe that Toowoomba and Bundaberg will be next. They're the growth areas of the future, because you can still buy houses there for $400,000-$500,000 with really good yield and really strong cash flow potential. But at the same time, what's happening in Perth now is that people who did have a house they might have bought for $250,000, $300,000 are now seeing it worth nearly double that. And there's been very little growth in the upper areas of the market. So all the growth's been concentrated in that lower area where the investors and buyers agents have been flocking in. So they think, let's upgrade and move to a better suburb and get a better house, because it's not going to cost us that much to do it. And that's what's happening now in Perth. And I think that's where the growth is, what we call the ripple effect. It moves up through the market, and it will move into the middle areas of Perth. You'll see strong growth occurring there, and people there will upgrade and do the same thing again. So the growth moves through the market, and that's why you say not all suburbs perform the same. Even as the growth slows down in the bargain price, or what were bargain price suburbs, it will increase in those middle priced areas.
Yeah, awesome. So, okay, so you're saying, obviously, as far as Perth is concerned, what are you saying for that's going to happen to Perth in the near future? Now, I know we're obviously, myself and you and Jared from Investors Edge, we've obviously got a seminar next Saturday, the 25th of May in Perth. I know you're flying over from Sydney for the event, but obviously you're going to be talking about Perth, but for anyone that's sort of listening, that's thinking about going to the seminar, is there anything that, any sort of, anything you can tell us before the event?
Any gems? Well, I can certainly explain that. One is, a lot of times people panic when there's a lot of price growth, and they think, oh, that means the market could crash. They talk about bubbles, and we haven't heard that word, but I believe that'll soon come into the lexicon for the Perth market. People will start talking about, is it a bubble? Now, it's not if the demand for rental properties remains high, which it will, because there's a huge rental shortage. So although the growth...
We've lost you, John. You've just frozen.
Oh, have I?
You there? Yeah, you're back.
Oh, good. Okay. At what point did you lose me?
I think maybe answer that question again. So I don't know if it was your internet or my internet, but it definitely freezed for a little bit.
Okay. Well, to answer the question, I think it's about the fact that there's a lot of talk about when property prices go up a lot, people say it's a bubble, and they talk about the fact that there's speculative buying, and that means the whole thing could fall over. And people are reminded of what happened during after the mining boom years in 2012. And they think, well, maybe that could happen again. But as long as the underlying demand for rental properties is there, then that won't happen. So the price growth may slow down in the lower priced areas of Perth, but there's not going to be a crash as long as you've got all these people pouring in, wanting rental accommodation. That sort of underpins the whole market. So I can see the first thing is, don't panic. If you start to see headlines about bubbles in Perth, it's not going to happen. There's going to be no crash. It may be a moderation of growth, but the main thing is that growth is going to move into the middle priced areas. So it's good news for people who are looking at buying, that 600,000 plus buy price. That's where the growth will start in Perth now. And the other thing, of course, is we're only talking about houses. We haven't talked about the unit market, which hasn't really caught up. And so you can buy, a two-bedder in Perth in, say, the CBD or the inner urban areas of Perth for around 450,000, 500,000. That is an incredible bargain if prices are about to go up. Now, as as Graham mentioned, yes, I'm doing a live event, flying over Saturday the 25th, and this event will be co-hosted by Graham and also Jared Mann from Investors Edge. So what I'm going to be doing at that event is actually giving you my tips for the best growth areas in Perth, in WA as a whole. Graham will be sharing his secrets on how to maximise your profit in the shortest possible time. Jared will be giving you his success secrets for the Perth market as well. And I'll be talking also about the next areas that are set to boom in Australia. So if you're thinking of investing outside Perth, well, then there are many opportunities, and I'll be telling you where they are and what to buy. So that's an event that really, if you're serious about investing, it will be a great event to attend, because of nothing like this in Perth for a long, long time.
Awesome, John. Really appreciate that. Now, there's going to be a lot of people watching this that are not from Perth, but they still, want your wisdom. So for those that are obviously not from Perth, I think, for a long time, people have always thought, you need to obviously invest in your own backyard, because, people, it's kind of, the whole industry is kind of, revolutionized with, buyers agents and, property analysts like yourself now, who are obviously helping people buy interstate. So, so for the people that are listening that are interstate, for example, but they're thinking about, buying in Perth, or, they don't know where to look and all that sort of stuff, how could those sorts of people reach out to you?
Well, I think the best way is we've got our database. We've had that since 2011. That's over 13 years. And it's got a predictive accuracy rate of over 90% in terms of predicting the direction and intensity of price growth. So the best resource you could possibly have access to is reports from that database, because they will predict the areas that have got the greatest growth potential and also the greatest cash flow potential. So these reports are available on our website, which is called lindemanreports.com.au. You can go there, but you don't have to buy a report. There's a lot of information. There's blogs, videos, information from me. I do a monthly Insider Insights, in which I share my latest findings about the market, a wealth of information. So I invite you to go to the website, have a look. That certainly is, a very, very quick and easy way of getting some real good intelligence about markets around Australia. And if you want to buy the reports, of course, you can find out more about them on our website as well.
Awesome. We do have one question in the chat from Stephen. He's asked anything about the Sydney market. So obviously you've mentioned that there's a lot of opportunity still left in the tank in Perth, and then also Southeast Queensland is going to be a great place, and even regional Northern Queensland as well is going to be a great place to invest. But what about Sydney? And I know you're from Sydney.
Well, it's the one market, that always defies expectations. People think it's too expensive, it's not going to do anything. But when you look at how the market performs, when over a third of the people who own property don't actually have any debt remaining on that property, in other words, they've owned it outright, they've paid off the mortgage, that means that there's very little sort of restraint for that type of market. So a lot of people in Sydney are quite happy paying well over $1 million for a 3-bedroom house. Well, they're not happy about it, but they certainly have no choice. And price growth will continue as long as that demand for properties continues in Sydney. So my view of the Sydney market is it will continue to grow. There's no upper limit. It's not going to boom in the way that, say, Brisbane might, or Perth is doing, or Adelaide has done. But it's certainly not going to go backwards either. Whereas in Melbourne, it's a slightly different situation, and there's much more restraint on the property market. People are moving interstate. The situation is not as bright as it is in other capital cities, but Sydney, certainly moderate growth, I would predict, for the next few years.
Very good, John. Well, awesome. Just to recap for anyone that's in Perth, myself and John and Jared Mann from Investors Edge, the three of us will be presenting on next Saturday, May the 25th. It's at which hotel is it at?
I think it's the Edge, but you'll find out if you go to the registration page.
It's in the link. The link's in the chat, everyone.
Oh, great. Okay. And so that's on lindemanreports.com.au. There's a page there where you can register, and you'll get all the information. It's located in the CBD in Perth, the event. I know that much. And I'll certainly be there on Saturday the 25th, and look forward to sharing the information that I have for you.
Awesome. Look, really appreciate it, John. Like I said, from the beginning, I've been following you a long time. I've been super impressed with your, predictions. Not only that, Hobart and Perth, like you said, I also remember you predicting Brisbane as well when it had its run. So, and even, my journey last few years of, flipping and all that sort of stuff, I've, stayed up to date and used your data. I've bought your reports. I've, regularly had conversations with you, send you emails. Whenever you give me an answer, I typically will not argue it, but I definitely want the reason as to why, so that way I'll get that clarification. So I'm definitely super appreciative for the information that you've been able to provide me and the education you've been able to give me over the last few years. So appreciate it, John, and really also appreciate you coming on and sharing your time, and look forward to catching up next. Well, it's only a week away on Saturday 25th.
Saturday the 25th, and if you are in Perth, anyone and everyone, please register and come to the event, because you'll find it well worth your while. So thanks, Graham, for inviting me to the program as well.
No problems at all. Awesome. Thank you very much, and speak to you soon.